The Hartley Show is an entertainment program and does not own any of the copyrighted material featured in this episode. All copyrighted material featured will be used as fair use for purposes of criticism, comment, news reporting, and/or research. Taki.
Today on The Hartley Show, I'm going to be talking about the Golden Avenger, the transistor-powered Marvel, the Invincible Iron Man. Iron Man was created in 1963. He first appeared in a comic called Tales to Astonish. Now, Iron Man, of course, is Tony Stark, a venture capitalist, industrialist, weapons manufacturer who goes to, I think it was Vietnam, for whatever reasons, and he gets into an accident. There's an explosion that goes off, and as we all know, because everybody and their dog has seen the movie, I don't know why people are taking their dogs to movies. And a piece of shrapnel lands near his heart and almost kills him. But what he does is he designs this chest piece that magnetically locks the shrapnel away from his heart. And then to get away from these bad dudes that have got him and this Yin Sang, I think his name was, scientist captured, he designs a whole suit of armor that saves the day, kind of. Well, at least he frees himself. But of course, his pal, his fellow scientist is murdered. And it gives him this motivation to go and fight the forces of evil and whatnot. Now, one of the truly interesting things about Iron Man is how much he changed and how much he evolved as science evolved and Stan Lee's understanding of science sort of evolved. I'm sure it had a lot to do with other writers. Stan Lee is sort of notorious for coming up with absolute super bunk science, like super bunk science. Now, originally when Iron Man was created, he had far less the range of capabilities that we think of him now. He couldn't fly so much as he could shoot sort of these bursts of jet propulsion from his boots, and he had these suction cup things. He would attach himself to ceilings and walls and whatnot. He was sort of almost Spider-Man-esque. He didn't have repulsor beams at first. He could shoot sort of waves of magnetic force. And in his first appearance, he creates a blowtorch. He had a lot more gadgets back in the day. Neat things like drills he would attach to his hand to go through the ground and lots of other things I can't think of right now. So, of course, throughout the years, Iron Man has a ton of different armor suits that he's worn and designed. One of the common misconceptions is that he started off, of course, in the gray outfit and moved on to the golden outfit, but they aren't a different suit of armor. In fact, the only reason he changed the appearance of his armor is because people were afraid of it. Sobbing in terror, in fact, crying for their daddies to hide them from the terrifying gray Iron Man. So he went and spray painted it because someone suggested, and maybe it should look golden. So they aren't different suits of armor, they're the same thing, just colored differently. And from that point on, he moved on to what is known as sort of the classic Iron Man armor, the Golden Avenger, where it's the red and gold look that was actually designed by Steve Ditko. Kind of neat little note. And you know, one of the most interesting things, again, is classically we think of Iron Man as this guy with repulsor beams. He didn't start off with repulsor beams. Repulsor beams took quite a while to actually become sort of part of the Iron Man lexicon. Initially, as I had already stated, they were just sort of these magnetic force waves that slowly but surely they were referred to as repulsor rays. Now, one of the other interesting things about Iron Man's suits of armor is, of course, as technology has grown, we've gotten closer and closer to actually being able to design in the real world things like actual Iron Man armor. I just read an article recently where the U.S. military is designing what they're calling a Iron Man suit of armor, and they referred to this thing as technology that's beyond the scope of Iron Man because they're using a sort of liquid metal, which means that basically whoever wrote this article didn't do the research in Iron Man because there's been a couple of versions of Iron Man that actually has liquid metal armor that comes out of his body and whatnot. Stupid journalists. Now, Iron Man's been involved with obviously tons and tons of storylines throughout the years of his decades of existence. But probably one of the most significant storylines of all time is Demon in a Bottle, where Iron Man struggles with his alcoholism. This was sort of born on Justin Hammer takes control of his suit of armor and he kills someone remotely with it, and it sends Iron Man spiraling off into this sort of depression where he's struggling with his relationship with his then relationship with Bethany Cabe, I believe her name was, and he absolutely turns into a stupid crazy drunk. He becomes a crazy drunk, flying around in his suit of armor and messing things up, and at one point he flies through every billboard in New York City that has any reference to alcohol in it. Now, at the end of the storyline, he actually conquers his demons temporarily, as it turns out, and puts down the bottle, but as time went on, his continual struggles with alcohol resurfaced, and for a good long period of time, he was not Iron Man. And this is when the character James Rhodey, who later is known as War Machine, took over in the role of Iron Man for almost about 30 issues. Of course, a big part of that was the original Secret Wars, where James Rhodey was the Iron Man during Secret Wars, and he was also one of the founding members of the West Coast Avengers. But eventually, Tony Stark put back on the armor and took back over the mantle of the Invisible Iron Man. When he came back, he wore this silver and red armor. It was pretty cool, although a lot of fans kind of had a hard time with it. It was the only time that he actually didn't wear the red and gold armor other than his original incarnation. Iron Man's cast of supporting characters has shifted quite a bit throughout the years. Initially, he didn't really have any supporting characters in the book, and then slowly he gained two, Pepper Potts and Happy Hogan. One was his chauffeur, was sort of his bodyguard, even though Iron Man himself was supposed to be Tony Stark's bodyguard, and Pepper Potts his secretary. They really didn't do too much with the characters. They sort of lingered in the background, not really doing much. At one point, Happy Hogan became this super-powered freak called the Freak, who just walked around in kind of this white smock. It was kind of a cool idea for a storyline, but Gene Colan, rest in peace, he really didn't add anything terribly exciting to the look. And eventually, they left the book. I believe they got married, and that's when James Rhodes sort of became the more through character background supporting guy. Also, as well, at one point, I believe Pepper Potts was replaced by a character by the name of Miss Abergast, I think her name was, a sort of older lady with glasses who would just sort of sit behind the desk and do important assisting things for Tony Stark. Now, Pepper Potts came back into the book, as did Happy Hogan, throughout, I think it was Civil War. Spoiler alert, they killed off Happy Hogan, and James Rhodes has sort of maintained the position as Tony Stark's right-hand man ever since. They also evolved Pepper Potts. She had her heart injured, and they gave her, Tony Stark designed a suit of armor for her where she took on the name Rescue, and the concept behind that being that she didn't have any real offensive capabilities. She was more designed to rescue people, which I thought was kind of quaint and nice. Now, one of the classic Iron Man shticks is that he carries around his armor in a briefcase and assembles it from that point, which kind of doesn't really make sense if you think of the Iron Man armor as just a big solid hunk of stuff. But the classic concept behind Iron Man was that the material the suit's made from is actually pliable. It's sort of silk-like and or made of a chain mail superfine mesh. They've referred to it as two different things, and the concept being that it hardens with a magnetic sort of zap that gets sent through it all. One of the really stupid things about this concept was that it's sort of retroactively gone in the opposite direction. That originally he had this amazingly powerful suit of armor that can be folded up like a cloth to a really small size, but as time has gone on, the suit actually seemingly has gotten almost less powerful and become more bulky in this strange sort of way. As, like I sort of was saying earlier, our science understanding has grown, and we've tried to make the Iron Man concept be more realistic. And initially, the reason that he got rid of his original armor was it was referred to as bulky and heavy, even though this totally contradicts exactly what I'm talking about now. When he moved on to stage 2 of the armor, the classic red and golden armor, the idea was that the armor would attach itself through a magnetic pull. He would put on the gauntlets and he would put on the chest piece, and then the gauntlets would retract out his sleeves and leg parts through a magnetic locking mechanism was the idea behind that. That's no longer the case at all. The last version of Iron Man, it was a subcutaneous sort of liquid metal insert in his body, and it would sort of spew out and create the armor around him. The current version of the Iron Man armor that's just been relaunched after Secret Wars is a suit of armor. The concept behind this is that it's a suit of armor that can be any other prior suit of armor, so it incorporates all of sort of the classic old Iron Man greatnesses, as well as the new modern sexy. Little known fact, now we all know that Tony Stark used to have to wear his chest piece all the time lest he die, but what most people don't know is that thing was filled with jagged, weird transistors. That means that not only would it have been difficult to itch himself, but that thing must have been some stanky, mold-ridden pile of Tony Stark cologne, anyone? Now, of course, I'd be a fool if I didn't mention the movies, because I believe that most of us have a greater understanding of Iron Man and appreciation of him because of the brilliant first movie that launched essentially the modern Marvel Cinematic Universe. Of course, starring Robert Downey Jr., who's had his own struggles with substance abuse. The first Iron Man movie changed sort of the scope, the path, the direction of the modern superhero movie, and has launched Iron Man front and center in the world of films at this point in time. So as sort of a consequence of that, Marvel is trying to put Iron Man as sort of first and foremost as their number one character. We'll see if it works with this latest new Iron Man book written by Brian Michael Bendis. I do believe it reached the number one spot that month on the sales charts, but whether or not it will maintain, only the future will tell. Now, of course, there's been a lot of other Iron Man stuff. He had the cartoon Iron Man Armored Adventures. He's been a main player in the last two Avengers cartoons, one of which I believe is still running. And there's been a host of cartoons, some of which have been absolutely horrible as direct-to-DVD movies and that sort of like. I think there's been a couple of video games too, but I haven't heard of any Iron Man video game that was actually good. Now, of course, the original concept behind Iron Man was that he had the damaged heart, but eventually Tony Stark got his heart fixed. But I guess they wanted to sort of maintain this idea that he had a sort of physical ailment. So throughout the past, they've stuck Tony Stark in these situations where the heart got redamaged or he had some sort of issue. At one point he got shot in the chest. Another point he had this weird degenerative sort of like cancer-like thing that had taken over his body and he had to wear this undersuit. And during that time he took on, well, basically he changed the armor to what we now know as War Machine. And at some point he was considered dead, and James Rhodes took over the suit again, and this time actually took on the moniker of War Machine, as you sort of see here. Now, this suit of armor that I'm actually wearing, the suit on my shirt, why was that so hard to say, is referred to as the Iron Patriot armor. So James Rhodes himself has also adopted a couple of different identities. He, of course, as I was saying earlier, was at one point Iron Man, at one point he was War Machine, at one point he was Iron Patriot. I believe now he's War Machine again. Now, they haven't done much in the way of retconning Iron Man's past, but they have done a little bit. The current Iron Man comic book launches off sort of ignoring the past incarnation, the superior Iron Man take where he had gone totally evil. I'm sure at some point they will reconcile how he got from point A to point B, Secret Wars being in the middle, how he goes from being evil Tony Stark to the modern Tony Stark that we know, but right now we have no idea how he went from point A to point B. It could just be that, you know, the universe got rewritten during Secret Wars, and when it got rewritten, he just got sort of put back to normal, sort of like they did way back in the day when they made Tony Stark young after he had been evil during Avengers: The Crossing, and he was going around murdering people because of Kang and all that crap. So prior to the superior Iron Man, the evil version I was just talking about, we had the Kieran Gillen take on Iron Man, where they did retcon his past, and what they said is, spoiler alert, his parents aren't actually his parents, and he was adopted. Tony Stark isn't actually, well, I don't really need to explain adoption, do you? Do I? Do you or I? He didn't come from the Cabbage Patch. And of course, I need to make a little side note, a little tip of the hat to the Ultimate Iron Man version, the Iron Man from the Ultimates, who I believe probably inspired largely the current, cinematic version of Iron Man. They really focus on the fact that Tony Stark likes to drink, and they had this sort of neat shtick with his Iron Man suit, whereby when he put it on, he had this layer of sort of slippery goop that I guess helped with the cybernetics of the suit and whatnot. The only version of Iron Man, I do believe, that ever had a layer of slippery goop between him and the armor. So there you have it, the Invincible Iron Man. As always, thanks for watching, and a giant thanks to Taz for letting us film here and take up their space. See you next time.